Welcome. Our next presentation is going to be on opportunities as a medical writer, and we're very pleased to have back for us Dr. Morgan Leaf. Dr. Leaf is a successful medical writer who has experience in many forms of medical writing, including CME and CE needs assessments and content creation, board-style multiple choice questions and explanations, patient-facing educational materials and blogs, advisory board and conference coverage, slide decks, news stories, and medical copywriting. She's also a professional resume writer for physicians, as well as serving as a career counselor for aspiring physician medical writers. Dr. Leaf is board certified in both pediatrics and clinical informatics and has 14 years of clinical experience. She received her BS from Rutgers Go Scarlet Knights and her MD from Thomas Jefferson. Dr. Leaf is a Sikh alumna. Welcome back, Dr. Leaf.
Thank you so much for having me, Jim. And I'm excited to talk about one of my favorite topics today, which is opportunities as a medical writer. As Jim mentioned, my name is Morgan Leaf. I am a former pediatrician turned full-time medical writer and resume writer. Here's what we're going to talk about today. First, we'll define what is medical writing. Then we'll discuss what the types of medical writing are. Talk about what it means to work in an employed versus freelance setting. Help you understand if medical writing is right for you. Talk about how to get started if you're interested. And address the issue of compensation. So what is medical writing? Here is the definition as per the American Medical Writers Association. Medical writing involves the development and production of print or digital documents that deal specifically with medicine or healthcare. A vague definition if you're really trying to understand what our day-to-day work is, but it's purposely vague because medical writers do a lot of different things in their day-to-day work. So before we jump into what those day-to-day things are, I think it's important to address who medical writers are because a lot of physicians are surprised to learn the mix of people that go into medical writing. And actually, a majority of medical writers here at the top, these are rough estimates. So about 40% or so, the biggest group is PhDs, or people with other doctorate level degrees. About 25% of medical writers have a master's degree, typically in a science area. And then 15% have a bachelor's degree, again, typically in a science area, although we have a number of English majors in our profession. About 10% of medical writers are physicians and another 10% are pharmacists. And the reason I bring this up is because I think it's really important to know, if you're interested in medical writing, that your MD is a huge asset in this field. You're not competing with hundreds of other MDs for a particular role. You are only 10% of the profession and therefore have a huge advantage in your background and knowledge base. So let's jump into the types of medical writing, and you can see them listed here on the screen. I'm going to go through them one by one to give you an idea of what's involved in each different type of medical writing. And these categories are not entirely arbitrary, but a little bit arbitrary and designated by, again, the American Medical Writers Association, but you'll see there's a lot of overlap between them. So the first category is regulatory writing. And when I talk to people about medical writing, I like to divide it into two buckets. I always say regulatory writing and non-regulatory writing, because to me, regulatory writing is very different from all the other types of medical writing. So folks who specialize in regulatory writing write and edit documents that are required by regulatory agencies. So this typically means working for a pharmaceutical or a biotech company and preparing documents for FDA approval and everything that goes into a new drug application, getting the drug approved, and marketing the drug. Scientific publications are something that a lot of you are probably already familiar with because you've probably published in journals, many of you, in your academic careers. So scientific publications is simply writing and editing manuscripts for peer-reviewed journals. There is a lot of work available in the scientific publication space. And besides writing journal articles, you may also create posters, submit abstracts to conferences, make slide decks for scientists who are presenting at medical conferences. Lumped into this, although this is one that I might consider as sort of a separate section, is covering conferences and news stories for professional audiences. So I could think of that as healthcare journalism and a little bit separate from publications. This can be a lot of fun if you like to travel and see new places and work on tight deadlines. So it's a little bit different than the very long timeline of writing for a journal. So folks who work in the scientific publications field are usually in academic or industry settings. Health communication is another category of medical writing, and we use this term to encompass really any writing and editing that is for the purpose of lay audiences. So not fellow clinicians, but for the general public or patients with a specific disease. This type of work tends to appeal to physicians quite a bit because that's a lot of why we became physicians, right? We wanted to explain things to our patients. We want them to understand their health and their diseases so that they can live a better life. And so there is a variety of different types of work where you can do this as a medical writer, sometimes as a blog, sometimes writing for a hospital website. So folks who do health communication may work in academia, public health, government settings, or for private companies. So it really spans the gamut. Here's where I work. So I'm going to give a little extra plug here. CME, so continuing medical education, or CE, continuing education writing, involves creating materials needed to propose and develop CME activities. So what those of us who work in the CME field do is help develop grants for medical education companies or hospitals or professional associations to apply for funding to fund continuing medical education activities. And once these activities hopefully get funded, then we work to create the content. This involves making slides. It involves meeting with faculty who are experts in their areas. It may involve writing a script, making an infographic. So lots of different aspects to CME writing. It's not just sitting down and typing. There's a lot of different creative elements to it as well. As well as creating CME activities for a professional audience, lumped into this category is designing training materials for pharma or biotech employees. So a lot of the work I see available in this realm is creating slide decks and educational activities for pharmaceutical sales reps. When somebody is hired as a sales rep for a pharmaceutical company, they need to learn in great detail about the disease state and the drug they are representing. So folks who do CME or CE writing work at medical education companies, healthcare professional organizations, and pharma or biotech companies. Promotional writing is another division of medical writing, and folks who work in promotional writing create marketing and advertising materials to promote drugs and medical devices. So this sometimes worries people who say, well, I don't have a marketing or an advertising background. And that's true. Most of us don't, but you, A, are usually working with somebody who does, and B, what's really required here is medical expertise and an expertise in exactly what you are and aren't allowed to say in marketing and advertising materials for pharmaceutical products, which, as you know, is very different than other products that are marketed. So folks who work in promotional writing often work in industry or for a medical communications agency, which we haven't covered what that is yet, but a medical communications agency is a company that will typically hire either employed or freelance medical writers to work in a variety of areas. So they might do CME, they might do promotional writing, they might do advisory boards, which is another one of my favorite things to do, which involves attending a meeting of key opinion leaders or experts in a certain field when a new drug or product is being released, and taking notes at the meetings, usually like an all-day, 8-hour meeting, And we take notes and create an executive summary of what the experts have discussed as far as ways to market and promote the drug. And there's also grant writing, which is another aspect of medical writing that many of you may already be familiar with. I bet a lot of you have already written grants in your practice setting. And so you're pretty familiar with this, writing and editing grant proposals to fund scientific research. So folks who work in the grant writing field work for academic institutions, foundations, advocacy groups, and other professional organizations. So we've talked about the main different types of medical writing, and trust me, there's things that don't fall under any of those umbrellas that some of us end up doing. But that's really the gist of what most people do in the medical writing field. And now we need to talk about how you can work as a medical writer, because there's two options, freelance or employed. And I used to present this list as sort of a pros and cons list, but it turns out that different people think that different things are pros and cons. So now I just present this as a comparison of freelance versus employed work. So you can imagine this applies to fields outside of medical writing, but in my experience as a medical writer, these are some of the differences between taking a freelance position and an employed position. So when you're freelance, you can work from anywhere. I work part-time in California and part-time in Philadelphia. And I've also worked on vacation in Italy. So you can really work anywhere you want when you're freelance. You make your own hours. I'm lucky to live on the West Coast, and I just start working when I get up in the morning, which is a few hours into the workday of most of my clients who are on the East Coast. You can choose your clients. I cannot emphasize how important this is. You know, when you're employed, you can't choose your boss, you can't choose your coworkers, but you can choose who you want to work with as a freelancer. And if a certain relationship doesn't work out, you can move on. You get to set your own rates. And we'll talk a little bit about compensation and how we set our rates in medical writing. You can try new things. I already mentioned that there are fields within medical writing that I didn't cover in the last few slides. Somebody calls you and asks you, hey, can you try doing XYZ? This is how I became a resume writer. Yes, absolutely. Try it out. Those opportunities don't really come up when you're employed. Now, maybe a little bit of a downside. I don't have any PTO. So when I'm not working, I'm not getting paid. This is maybe a plus, maybe a minus. I also don't have employee benefits. So this is something that is not insurmountable, but takes some navigating when you work as a freelancer and has different considerations for people with maybe different makeups to your family, different people depending on you for health benefits. So you really want to research this aspect of things if you're considering freelance work. Your income varies over time. So I don't get a set amount of pay every month that I can expect. I might make more one month and less another month. It all evens out in the end. But if that makes you uncomfortable, then maybe freelancing isn't for you. There's less mentoring. I'm not going to say there's no mentoring as a freelancer. I have experienced medical writers who've been kind enough to take me under their wings, and I've learned a ton from them. You do need to seek it out a little bit more. It's not built in like in an employed position, but it's, it's available. And listen, this may be a plus for some people, maybe a minus for others. You're more isolated when you're freelancing. I am perfectly happy to sit at home under my covers, working in my pajamas all day. That makes me very happy. You might be more social and say, well, I would go nuts if I wasn't in an office with coworkers to talk to. That being said, a lot of employed medical writers also work from home. That's really a pretty common industry standard. So finding an employed position where you also have an office where you need to work is definitely rare in medical writing, but it does exist. So let's talk about employed positions. When you're employed, you probably have more opportunities for mentorship. You have typically access to employee benefits. You get to work on a team. Whether you see this as a plus or a minus is up to you. I like working by myself a little bit better. You don't have any business responsibilities. So again, is this a plus or is it a minus? I have found in my 5 years of running my business that I love running my business. I never thought that was something I'd be interested in, but I really enjoy taking care of things behind the scenes. So you may find that you like doing that, and it's a downside to an employed position. You should be getting a steady paycheck in an employed position, which is nice and reliable. All your eggs in one basket. What do I mean by this? Well, what I hear from people a lot when we're talking about how to work as a medical writer is they say, oh, well, I need to be employed because I need the reliability of having a job. But to me, I challenge that point because as a freelancer, I'm working for about 10 different clients at any given time on various projects at various stages. If I lose one of those clients, well, I still have 90% of my income, right? If you're employed and you lose your job, you've lost 100% of your income. And that happens in this industry just as it happens in the medical field now. So that's something to consider. You may need to work in an office if you're employed. Again, is that a plus or a minus? I always put work on a team here twice because I'm not keen to work on a team. I don't know about you. You report to a boss. Again, is this good? Is this bad? My sister sent me a meme yesterday that said, if you thought working for yourself meant that you would have a boss that you don't hate, you were wrong. So, I guess there's plus and minuses to that. And typically in an employed position, but not always, you have a little more of a fixed schedule. So you may or may not like that. I really like the latitude I have in scheduling doctor's appointments and haircuts and whatever I need to do for my life in the middle of the day, and then maybe catching up on work in the evening. So, how do you know if medical writing is right for you? And here is a list that I came up with of qualities of medical writers. So, this may sound a little silly, but first and foremost, do you like to write? We spend a substantial amount of our time sitting at a computer and writing. Are you comfortable cranking out 2,000 words a day when you need to? Because if that's not for you, then probably medical writing is not for you. I don't mind sitting a lot. Again, this might sound a little bit silly, but this to me was something I didn't think about before I became a medical writer. And actually, I found was very difficult and kind of contrary to my natural tendency to be on the move. So you really have to consider how you're going to feel, how you're going to keep yourself healthy when you suddenly go from a busy clinic or a busy hospital to sitting at a desk. I'm happy working alone. We covered this one already. So that's something to think about on a personal level. I never work alone because my 2 dogs are always with me, my assistants. So you may be in the same boat. I am comfortable networking. And now you're saying, Morgan, what the heck? You just told me I can work at home alone and be isolated. And now you're telling me I have to network. Yes, this is true. And we'll get into this a little bit more in a few minutes. But the way to get work in medical writing is by networking. It's not by applying for jobs on LinkedIn. It's by getting to know people. So you absolutely have to be comfortable with this, not a cheesy way, in a really normal, cordial way. So we'll get into that. And I like to learn new things. This to me is one of my absolute favorite aspects about being a medical writer that I also didn't realize before I entered the field. So you could certainly go into medical writing and specialize in whatever was your clinical specialty when you were practicing. A lot of people do that. It's a very reasonable thing to do. I chose not to do that because there's not a ton of work for pediatric writing. So I write about everything: oncology, neurology, cardiology, nephrology, you name it. I have written about it and I absolutely love it. I'm learning all these new things, all these innovative treatments. I feel like I'm back in medical school, learning so much, but without the tests. So if that appeals to you, you'll probably really love being a medical writer. So if I've piqued your interest and you want to get started and build your medical writing business or learn more about the field, let's talk about 4 steps that you can take to turn yourself into a medical writer. First, you want to build your skills, then start writing, networking, and finding paid work. So let's go through each of these. There are many ways to build your skills in medical writing. And one thing that I want to emphasize is there are certainly certification programs out there. I have these down here. University of Chicago has one. UC San Diego has one. They're a couple of years. They're a significant financial investment. Harvard has one now, and you can invest in these if you need to, but you don't have to. It's the instinct of every physician to say, well, I'm going to do something new. I must have to get a new degree. You do not. Most of your employers, whether full-time or freelance clients, don't know what these certificate programs are. So they generally are not building your resume, especially when your resume already has an MD or a DO on it. So if you want to take these programs, just know that they are going to be for your own knowledge and skill building. And if that is fine with you, you want a really deep dive, then maybe a certificate program is for you. If you'd rather get started more quickly and just build the skills that you need to get going as a medical writer, there are quicker ways to do that. First and foremost, I recommend that anyone who's even remotely interested in becoming a medical writer joins the American Medical Writers Association. This is a fantastic professional organization. Everyone is so welcoming, so cordial, just so helpful. And they also have courses on building your skills as a medical writer. A lot of folks from an MD, DO, PhD, or pharmacy background take Emma Hitt-Nichols' 6-week course. Even Emma herself will tell you it takes longer than 6 weeks to complete. So this course has 6 modules to it and associated homework assignments. And if you do well on those, Emma may hire you at the end as a subcontractor, which is a great way to get started. There's another website called Health Writer Hub that has a number of courses, including an Introduction to Medical Writing course that you can check out if you want to learn more. I highly recommend the book From Clinical Practice to Medical Writing by Dr. Mandy Armitage. She lays out all the steps that you need to get your foot in the door with medical writing. Lots of practical advice in that book. Alex Howson runs a website called Write CME. So if CME writing is specifically interesting to you, you might want to check out her website. She also just released a book, so you can check out her book as well. LinkedIn Learning. So a couple of things about LinkedIn Learning. Number one, you need a premium subscription to access LinkedIn Learning. But number two, a lot of times this is a benefit that your library might offer. So if you don't have a premium LinkedIn subscription, check out your local library and see if they have a way to access LinkedIn Learning. When I tell you that LinkedIn Learning has 1 million courses on everything you can imagine, I'm serious. So if you're like, I know how to build a really basic PowerPoint slide, but nothing beyond that, go on LinkedIn Learning, look for PowerPoint classes, take some of them, you'll be a whiz by the end. It's a great way to build your skills. And then the 2 organizations that I have listed down here, RAPS is the professional organization for regulatory writers. So if you're interested in regulatory writing, you want to check them out. And then Duke offers a free introduction to regulatory writing course that you can Google if regulatory writing is of interest to you. Most important thing here is to build the skills that you need to build to become a medical writer. So your learning needs to be for yourself and not for something to put on your resume. All right, step number 2, it's time to start writing. And you may already be a writer. You may have written some op-eds, some blog pieces, some handouts for your patients, and that's great. You want to gather these if you don't know where they are and hang on to them in an electronic form so that you can use them as a portfolio. What else can you do? Well, you can volunteer for different organizations. And those may be local nonprofit organizations. Those may be websites online that are not for profit. Something maybe for a cause that you believe in. You can reach out and say, hey, could I write a piece for you? It's a great way to get your work published online. You can also publish pieces on LinkedIn. That's really easy to do. And then you can add them to your LinkedIn profile. A lot of you may be familiar with Kevin MD. This website publishes a lot of different articles related to practicing medicine. I've published a few pieces on Kevin MD. He's published everything I've sent to him, so he's very generous with publishing. And Medium, if you start a Medium account, you can post blog pieces on Medium. So just start writing about any topics that interest you and gather these up to make your portfolio, because really the first thing people are going to ask you for when you apply for a medical writing role is for your portfolio. Next step, I said we were coming back to this, is networking. So again, networking does not have to be schmoozy. It doesn't, you're probably thinking cocktail hour and talking to strangers and slipping them business cards. And that's not really it at all. So LinkedIn is a great place to start networking just by connecting with other medical writers, especially other physician medical writers. So get on there, introduce yourself to people, say thanks for connecting, start commenting on their posts, following them, getting to know people, do the same with potential clients. And before you know it, you'll have a whole network of fellow medical writers. Again, we're back to AMWA, joining the American Medical Writers Association. There is an annual conference every year in October and November that I highly recommend attending if you're interested in medical writing. And then there's local chapters that you can join as well that also have online and local events. Now, you may say, wait a minute, I'm networking with my fellow medical writers. I thought I would need to network with potential clients. Well, guess what? As a whole, the field of medical writing has more work than it has people to do it. So us medical writers refer to each other a lot. You get somebody who reaches out and says, can you take on this project? I don't have time, but hold on, let me check with my friend, my colleague over here and see if they are available. So really, I've gotten a lot of work from my fellow medical writers when I was starting out. And I also offer work now to other medical writers. So getting out there and getting to know your fellow medical writers, who again are like the nicest people in the world, is really a great way to network and put yourself out there. There are other professional organizations that are more specific to certain types of medical writing. So, for example, I'm a member of the Alliance for Continuing Education in the Health Professions. This is the professional organization for continuing medical education, writers, providers, pharmaceutical companies. So I am a member of that organization and attend their annual conference as well. There's an organization for healthcare journalism. I already mentioned there's one for regulatory writing. So you may be interested in joining an organization that's more specific to your area of interest. And then, of course, just in general, connecting with colleagues, other connections. Maybe you think, oh, yeah, actually, you made me remember somebody in my class above me in residency became a medical writer. Maybe I should reach out to them. Yes. People who you know in your network would be probably extremely happy to talk to you for 15 minutes or so about their journey into medical writing. Last step is finding paid work. So where to begin? We already talked about, I'm going to highlight this first, even though it's down at the bottom of the slide, network, network, network. That's pretty much where all of my work comes from. I occasionally have people reach out to me on LinkedIn. I have never cold emailed anyone, but it does work. So if you put yourself out there, the work does come. This can be a little bit tough for medical writers or for physicians because we're very used to all the steps in the process. I go to medical school, I go to residency, I become an attending, and if I do those things, I know I will get X result. It's not the case in medical writing or a lot of other non-clinical fields. So you have to be willing to do is to put yourself out there with no idea whether a given situation is going to lead to work or not. So you might spend half an hour talking to a potential client, to a fellow medical writer, and it doesn't lead to anything specific in terms of income for you. But the more you keep doing it, one of these interactions will lead to work. And that is really important, but you're not going to know which one it is. So you have to keep just putting yourself out there. Again, we already talked about LinkedIn as a way to do this. A word of caution about LinkedIn. So LinkedIn job postings, and this goes for anything, not just medical writing. LinkedIn job postings are a little sketchy for a number of reasons. So I'll put in my LinkedIn profile creator hat for a moment and explain that companies purchase packages to post job listings on LinkedIn. So maybe they purchased a package for 10 job listings a month. Maybe that month they only have 5 jobs that they want to list. But they're going to leave up 5 old jobs because they've purchased that package and it's not in their interest to take the 5 old jobs down. By the same token, they may have 15 jobs they want to post that month, but they've only purchased the package for 10, so only a fraction of their available jobs are on LinkedIn. So, all this to say, when you see a job posting on LinkedIn, it really behooves you to go to the company's website and see if that posting is actually on their website. And if it is and you're interested in it, apply through the website. Now, again, I'm going to say, I actually don't know any medical writers, any physician medical writers who've gotten work by applying for a role on LinkedIn. So it's just not generally how business is done, but it can't hurt to reach out and see what's out there. I'm not going to say that it never works. AMWA, very important way to find paid work, especially as a freelancer. And by the way, even if you think that you really want an employed opportunity, freelancing while you're looking for an employed opportunity is a great way to get started and build your portfolio while you're job searching and earn a little money while you're doing it too. So I highly recommend paying for the freelance package on AMWA, joining the AMWA freelance directory, and making a nice, robust profile on there, similar to your LinkedIn profile. So you can check mine out and see what I have. I get clients relatively regularly from the AMWA freelance directory, and they're a lot more reliable in terms of knowing what they want and actually being good work than folks who reach out to me on LinkedIn, because people who go to AMWA know what medical writers do, know they want a medical writer, and are in the right place. So we've talked about now the steps to getting started, the steps to getting work. Let's just talk a little bit about compensation for medical writers. I think there's a lot of misconceptions out there about this. And if you look at general numbers for medical writer compensation, think back to that chart I showed you in the beginning about all the different backgrounds that people come from who enter medical writing. So I think it's valid and expected that as a physician medical writer, you can and should be charging more and paid more than somebody who is not a physician medical writer because of all the knowledge that you bring to your role. So that being said, AMWA does a compensation report every 5 years where they send out an extensive survey to the membership and compile everybody's responses. If you join AMWA, you can see this compensation report for free. The average salary that an employed medical writer can expect to make, I would say, is somewhere between $150 and $215, depending on where you're working. Again, I put a plus there because I think as a physician medical writer, you can garner a higher salary than this, especially in a freelance position. So an annual income for a freelance medical writer, yeah, it's going to be in the 150 range when you're starting out. But I always freely tell people my second year as a full-time medical writer, I made more money than I ever made as an attending pediatrician. I practiced for 11 years after residency. So if you're in a lower income specialty, then you can expect to replace or surpass your income as a medical writer if you are willing and able to work full-time. A lot of people go into medical writing because they want to work part-time. They're thinking of it as a retirement role, and that's great too. You can absolutely do that, and your compensation will be, comparable. If you work 20 hours a week, you'll make half of this, and that's very, very easy to do. So don't be deterred if you can't work full-time. There's plenty of part-time work out there as a freelancer. So I would say annually, once you're at it for a while, you can definitely expect to make well over $200,000. And then the average hourly rate for freelancers in the 2024 compensation report was $130 an hour. I'll tell you that my hourly rate is much higher than this. I think this is a great starting point for physician medical writers, but as you gain experience, as you gain clients, you can start charging more than this. Remember, when you charge an hourly rate, though, and you are billing by the hour, there's also unpaid tasks that you need to consider. So that doesn't mean you're getting paid that for every hour that you're working. You still have to return emails, you still have to manage your accounting books and do all the other tasks that go along with running a business. So you have to set your hourly rate to compensate for those unpaid hours as well. In here, we have our considerations as far as whether you want to go for an employed or a freelance position, thinking about hourly versus annual salaries, of course, benefits, time off. We just talked about unpaid tasks, values. So, what do I mean by this? I vary my hourly rates based on different companies that I work for if I really feel strongly about their values. So I was doing question writing, multiple choice question writing for a website that specialized in LGBTQ health. It meant a lot to me to be able to do that. And I knew this was a startup business run by two lovely women. And I knew they really couldn't afford to pay me my typical hourly rate, but because I loved what they wanted to do and I wanted to be a part of it, I charged them a lower hourly rate because this was in line with my values. So you can absolutely vary things like that when you work as a freelancer. And then, what are the trade-offs of working with different clients, of charging different rates? There's no finite answer to this. This is just something that every person needs to decide for themselves. So that's a little bit about compensation. And that's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for joining me. And here's my contact information.
Thank you so much, Dr. Leaf. A few questions for you, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
All right. So, just for the audience, curious, because I know I'm curious, and if you're comfortable doing so, could you tell us a little bit more about your story and why you transitioned and what your career satisfaction is like now compared to when you were practicing pediatrician?
Absolutely. And, I think my fellow physicians can relate to the fact, especially my fellow pediatricians who may be watching this, that people are a little shocked when they hear, wait, you're unhappy being a pediatrician? Isn't that the happiest profession in the world? And I always say I will stand by my statement that pediatricians are the greatest folks in the world. They are fighting the good fight, and it's a fabulous and important field. And I was just getting a bit burned out from it. What I struggled with was just taking it all home with me. I am taking care of sick kids all day. I wasn't good at letting that go at the end of the day, and it was really weighing on me. And I kind of knew that from the beginning. And that's why I went back to school and got my master's in healthcare administration and informatics, which may sound very unrelated to what I do right now, but I did enjoy getting that degree. I did do some informatics work for a while, thinking that was going to be my ultimate career path. And then for a number of reasons, I changed course and I discovered medical writing. And I said, oh, wait, this actually aligns better with my goal to work from home and spend more time with my family and be able to travel. And I was lucky enough to connect with Dr. Mandy Armitage, who provided some coaching to me, Dr. Heather Fork, who provided some coaching for me. And in talking things through with them, I just decided that medical writing really was the direction I wanted to go. I love to write. I love lifestyle. And I always say now, even on my worst day as a medical writer, because there are going to be bad days. I will tell you, absolutely, there are crazy clients out there. But even on my worst days as a medical writer, I still love it more than I love practicing clinical medicine. It just feels like a better fit for me. I don't think medicine, I'm pretty introverted, and going from room to room and talking to people for 15 minutes never really fit my personality very well. So I think that it doesn't leave me as exhausted at the end of the day. And I really value that.
Thank you so much. So, you mentioned, I believe, if I heard correctly, that CME and advisory board work are some of your favorite assignments. Could you explain a little bit why you like them so much?
I like CME writing for a number of reasons. One is I feel like it's a really good fit for physicians because we're talking about education for our fellow physicians. surprisingly, if you dive into the field, there's actually very few physicians in the CME field as far as people who are writing grants, getting grants, writing content. It's kind of surprising. And so I feel strongly about being a physician in that field because there's a lot of non-physicians, kind of like in hospitals these days. There's a lot of non-physicians out there saying, well, hey, this is how physicians want to learn, and this is how it should be, and this is how we should be teaching people. So I like to be the voice in the room that says, hey, I am a physician. How about my opinion? I also like the work because it's very creative. I don't want to sit and write all day. I don't do manuscripts. I don't have the attention span for that. But I like that I can do some writing. I can make some slides, which are really creative. I get to work with wonderful faculty. I get to design educational activities on Twitter. Kind of every day is different in terms of what I'm doing, and I really enjoy that. Advisory boards I love because a lot of the time they involve travel. So I'm somebody who loves to travel, and if that is something that suits your lifestyle, you might like advisory boards too. A lot of times, they're held in really nice places because they're flying in these well-known faculty members and putting them up somewhere nice. So you get to visit somewhere fun, and the work is very finite. So it's just you go to the advisory board, whether it's online or in person, you take notes, you write up summary, and it's done. And that is really a nice balance to CME projects can drag on for months and months sometimes. And you don't know when new pieces of work are going to pop up. So it can be a nice balance to have something that's just like, okay, I go, I do it, and it's done.
Thank you. You talked about the types of assignments you like the best. What are the types of clients that you like? Are there categories of clients? I know you like the people, but are there categories of clients that you personally enjoy working with the most?
So most of my clients in the CME realm are medical education companies. I work particularly with smaller medical education companies, which I think is a good fit as a physician because bigger medical education companies often have a medical director, and that can be good too. If there's a good medical director you can bounce ideas off of, that's a benefit. But it's also nice working with smaller companies where I get to function as the medical director for the project and the medical writer. I really feel like my knowledge and my opinion are valued in those settings. So I think, for me, it's a matter of testing out clients, figuring out who values me in that role. I don't personally like to be treated like a cog in the wheel. So I like clients who make me a part of their team, who I value above all just working with people who are nice and easy to work with. So I value that above compensation for sure. So I think that's what has worked out well for me.
Artificial intelligence. Do you use it in your work, and how do you see it affecting? You don't have a crystal ball, but how do you see it affecting the medical writing?
Yeah, great question. Because actually, I'm putting together 3 different talks right now that I'm giving at the Alliance for Continuing Education in the Health Professions annual conference on AI in CME. So yes, I use AI in my writing. And a lot of people, I think, especially folks who don't know about AI, think, oh, do you just put a prompt in and it does your whole paper? No, not at all. It's not there yet. That's not what it's for. I use it for smaller tasks. I use AI. I'm really bad at coming up with titles for doing medical education activities. So that's one thing they always want you to put in the grant. And I'm not creative with titles. ChatGPT gives you great titles for things if you put in what you're looking for. So I use it for that. You can use bigger large language models you can put, listen, it's sketchy on whether this is ethical or legal, but you can put journal articles. You can upload 20 of them into a system and say, hey, can you give me a synopsis of what these articles are saying about XYZ topic that I need to write about? So you can use it for certain steps. I use it often. I'll take an abstract from a scientific study And if I need to summarize that in my grant in about 3 or 4 sentences, I'll copy the abstract, I'll put it into ChatGPT. I'll say, summarize this for me in 3 or 4 sentences. I always check it. Everybody knows ChatGPT can hallucinate, so you always have to double check it yourself, but it generally always does a great job. So you need to learn to use it properly, but it can be a huge help for certain tasks in medical writing.
Changing tacks a little bit here. So one of the things about being a consultant, a freelancer, is it can be feast or famine, and the work could be lumpy. I think you mentioned that.
Mhm.
In medical writing, how far out are the typical deadlines? Because your lifestyle gets a lot worse if somebody calls you up today and says, I need a project done by 11 o'clock tonight, or I need it done by Monday. Can you give a sense as to how much lead time you have so you can kind of organize things and take a week off and do whatever you need to do?
It can be tough. It can be a juggling act. And the answer is it depends. So if you're into healthcare journalism, you probably have very tight deadlines and you need to just work that way. If CME can really vary because you put a timeline in a grant proposal and then you try and adhere to that timeline if you get the money. But I'll tell you that what happens is the timeline becomes whatever the faculty member's timeline is. So if your faculty member is on vacation in Australia for 3 weeks, it gets pushed back 3 weeks. So you cannot really solidly plan for things often in the CME world. And you have to learn to just juggle that. If I'm truly going to take a vacation where I don't work, which I'll be honest is rare, I start telling my clients 3-4 months in advance so that they know well in advance. If something comes up that week, I cannot address it. It will have to wait until the following week. Grant proposals and things like that. Nonprofit grant proposals, you generally have a good amount of time. Regulatory writing is sort of a constant need, I think. It's not very sudden. So it depends on your field, but it can definitely vary. You have to be good at rolling with the punches.
Fair enough. It's just like a doctor.
Yes.
So let's talk about getting paid because you mentioned that. How does the cash flow work in this? Do you get some money up front? Do people take you 90 days to pay? Do they pay right away? Does it vary? You have to be careful.
Yes. Yes to all of the above. You can choose how you want to invoice. I was actually just having a conversation about this yesterday with one of my colleagues who always invoices at the end of projects. I invoice at the end for smaller projects. So something's like $2,000. Sure, I'll wait till that's done to invoice. When we're getting to the 4, 5, 6 and above $1,000 range for a project, I usually ask for 50% upfront and 50% at the end of the project. Or for very large projects, some clients want to do a third, and that works. So generally, most of my clients have a 30-day turnaround for payments. I rarely have issues of people not paying. Maybe once or twice where it's really had to escalate, but I've never not been paid, thankfully, knock on wood. Some people I know work with clients who have longer turnaround times, 45, 60 days. We have conversations about this on the AmWA discussion board. Most people feel that 90 days is unreasonable, and we should push back on that as one-person businesses, most of us. So it usually is not a problem for me, but certainly bumps in the road can occur.
And then AmWA, just ballpark it. I know you're not quoting, and everybody, all the writers tell me AmWA. So I mean, they're the same thing, which is great. Do you have a ballpark as to how much it would cost maybe to join, go to a conference and get on their board and get some, just an order of magnitude, if you wouldn't mind, Dr. Leaf?
I think that an annual membership to AmWA is only like $250. It's really inexpensive. Like it's a really easy step to take as your step one getting into medical writing. Their conference is less expensive than other professional organizations. I think the conference fee this year, I was just there a couple of months ago, was maybe $800 for the conference. And they usually have very reasonable room rates to go along with that. They're very cognizant of having a lot of freelance members. I believe they even offer a discount code for freelancers to to register for the conference, and you also get I presented the conference, and so I got a discount rate for that as well to register. So it's pretty reasonable. And then the local chapters, their events, if you're kind of near a city where a lot of them are, those are usually really low budget things to do. And one thing you can do to meet people is, I can tell you, I'm the secretary of my local chapter of the Northern California chapter, and we always need volunteers. Like our board positions can be empty. So if you're really interested in meeting people and contributing and learning the ropes, just volunteer with your local chapter, and people will be so grateful and give you all the free advice you want.
Thank you so much. And then could you tell us a little bit more to the audience here about the coaching that you do on the resume writing and how you can help doctors individually to get where they want to be?
Sure. Yeah. So I do career counseling just for physicians interested in medical writing. I don't feel well versed enough in, pharmaceuticals or utilization review or anything else to really coach people on directly how to get into those fields. But if you're interested in getting into medical writing, please contact me. I'm happy to do one-on-one coaching sessions with you. I offer 30-minute or 60-minute sessions. And resume writing, I also create resumes and LinkedIn profiles for physicians transitioning to non-clinical careers. So you may already know that to apply to a non-clinical role, you absolutely must have a resume and not a CV. So I do white glove services for both of these, where I meet with you, do an 1.5-hour intake call, and talk about all of your skills and your transferable skills, and then create a unique document within 1 week that serves as your resume. And if you're interested, also a LinkedIn profile, which I always design to be different from your resume, which is very important. And that's my services.
And do you also, just a follow-up question, will you also help them if they have a particular job to customize it, to put all the buzzwords in that kind of meet that job?
I actually turn people away who don't know what field they want to go into yet, because that does happen a lot. People reach, I want to get out of clinical medicine. I might want to do med affairs. I might want to do utilization review. I might want to be a medical writer. I said, you're not ready for my services yet then, because you should not spend money on a resume until you know what field you want to go into. Because if you don't have the keywords and it's not tailored to that position, nobody's really going to take you very seriously. They have stacks and stacks of resumes. So your resume is your marketing document, and you want to make it stand out for that particular role.
Thank you very, very much, Dr. Leaf.
Thank you.